Thanks for the question about the situation between Serbia and Kosovo. I completely condemn the warmongering of President Vučić, and I'm not sure really what should be the result of a future meeting. I hear it's now announced for the end of August. If any meeting should make sense, it would be good to have it now and immediately, and also with American and European leaders present, and to ask Mr. Vučić why he threatens war again. Reciprocity is nothing worthy of war. It's normal interstate relation. And it's time for Serbia to recognize the Republic of Kosovo. As simple as this. And it's time for Serbia to also support Ukraine and to decide if they want to be part of the Western, of the free world, of Europe, or they want to be part of the Russian-Belarusian world. They cannot sit in between. Even the dictator of Belarus, Lukashenko, he made it very clear, asking where is Serbia? Man, from my side, if they want to really go to Russian side, I'm very sorry. But if that's their choice, we will isolate them and we will also cut all the trade links and the support links. And I think anyhow, that's what we need to do at the moment as a reaction to this new crisis and to this completely out of proportion overreaction of President Vučić. The EU candidate status of Serbia must be suspended and all the funding, the future funding, must be also withheld completely. All the EIB, EBRD, the EU pre-accession funding, all this must be also stopped, frozen, until Serbia fully breaks the relation with Russia and decides to be fully part of the West. And we have also to consider to sanction Mr. Vučić, put him on the sanction list, like Mr. Dodik. He behaves similar. And so let's put him on the sanction list and also on the US sanction list. That's the best way to do. And also strategically, Kosovo must think about why to have this dialogue. If Mr. Vučić makes a meeting and he says he will just go in order, whatever, to make a nice face there and do nothing and say nothing and don't recognize Kosovo, it simply makes no sense to have these meetings. I recommend Prime Minister Kurti to go in order to make a nice face, but it's absolutely, since 5 years, this dialogue is completely stuck and it's actually an exercise which is futile. I'm also calling for Mr. Lajčák. He has proven again and again to be completely on the wrong position. He might be a wonderful diplomat. Send him the ambassador to Ukraine. I call the Slovaks, or put him some position somewhere else. But in this situation, he is not the right personality to lead this dialogue because his country has not recognized Kosovo. And it's now about the recognition, because we have to get the recognition done. It's very important that Bosnia recognizes, because Bosnia is in a similar crisis with Serbia, and also Montenegro, by the way, because Serbia is in complete confusion and their foreign policy, their regional policy is very negative. I call as well for Albania and North Macedonia to leave the Open Balkans for Russia process, which Serbia has instigated in order to give government data accessible to Russia. And that's absolutely wrong. We have the Regional Cooperation Council and the EU-led dialogue process, not the dialogue, but the integration process. And that's the way forward. And we should really have a stricter line. I call as well for the end of Bulgarian gas transit to Serbia. I think that's a message they will be understood in Serbia. And also strategically, Kosovo has to make a new strategy. Obviously, NATO accession is the answer, and also building the infrastructure where you don't need to go via Serbia. That's why I call since many years for the tunnel to Montenegro to be all year winter safe, independent from the transit via Serbia. Because it's very humiliating to change the number plates and all these processes. And I miss as well in the communication, because I campaign many years now that the corruption of the border police of Serbia must also end, and that this must be a big topic. because many of the Kosovo citizens who pass via Serbia from the north, from Austria, where I live, yeah, or from Germany, and many of them, they live here, they have Kosovo papers, then they have to pay money to the border police. That's a highly corruptive system. And that's the reality of today's Serbia. And nobody talks about it. I cannot understand that. Yes, but also Serbia must be federalized, and that's for me very important. And I'm calling also for the Kosovo authorities to build an alliance with the regions where the minorities live in Serbia, especially the Vranja region and the Preševo Valley, but as well with Sanjak, with the Bosniaks who live there. I'm not sure when the last Kosovo politician was visiting Tusi and also Novi Pazar and Sjenica. This is very important. There must be also a good cooperation there and infrastructure built to help also the regions in Serbia, the minorities which are so suppressed in Serbia today. That's really very tragic situation. I call for a strategic partnership between Bosnia and Kosovo to join NATO together. And in Bosnia, most of the people are very much for NATO membership, and they are for recognition of Kosovo. And the Office of the High Representative should, and the international community should much more focus on a dialogue between Bosnia and Kosovo. That is actually the much better idea, to replace the Serbian dialogue with the so-called Belgrade-Pristina dialogue with a Sarajevo-Pristina dialogue, where then the cooperation is clear and there is goodwill, and the Office of the High Representative should use its veto power to override the vote of Mr. Dodik, and then to make it clear that Bosnia recognizes Kosovo, and then both countries together in NATO. That's the better strategy. Yes, and what is also very clear is that Ukraine should recognize Kosovo, and that Kosovo should invite Ukraine towards the Regional Cooperation Council and CEFTA, and that's very important. And my last of my 10 points, I call for the development of a Kosovo arms industry. That's really very important, as we've seen in the war in Ukraine. The defense of Ukraine, of course, was very much dependent on having an own arms industry. Of course, a lot of the high technology weapons have to come into Kosovo by the Americans in case of need. And now all these high-tech weapons are needed to the defense of Ukraine. But what Kosovo really needs to do strategically is to build up a small arms industry where Kosovo is ready and able and already ongoing to supply at least anti-tank weapons and small arms in probably a license of American or European suppliers. But to build up that arms industry must be possible with the technology capacities of Kosovo and the mineral resources. So some anti-tank rockets and some basic small arms industry must be developed in Kosovo very urgently, built by the state, paid by the state. And this is an absolute high priority now to be safe and secure. And absolutely, of course, as Austrian, we are unfortunately a neutral country. I'm calling for Austrian NATO membership, but it's very important that our soldiers who are in Kosovo in the framework of KFOR, and that they are ready to defend Kosovo's territorial integrity in the case of Serbian aggression. And it's very important that we stand together, Austria and Kosovo to stand together, and Bosnia, of course, against Serbian aggression. And the 10 points I made very clear. I'm happy and I think it's a good idea to have another meeting, but let's be very clear that this will be a futile exercise. And actually, why to go? I actually cannot understand the reason of the international community to recommend such a meeting. And it's much better to replace the Serbian-Kosovo dialogue. First of all, it should be a Serbian-Kosovo dialogue when it restarts, and the aim should be recognition. And in the meantime, the efforts of the international community should be focused on Bosnian-Kosovo dialogue towards recognition and mutual NATO membership. That is the way for peace in the Balkans. Serbia must be isolated, and only then Serbia will turn to the West. And that's the way forward for peace in the Balkans. Thanks a lot for this, and more to come from Pax Europiana. Bye.